one thing that I have learned by following geopolitics for some time now is that you don't send someone out and the person stays out. You always find a way to come back in because what you have or where you are is in their interest. So they want to find ways to still push their influence and their interest in your region. I'm saying this because after the setback in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger that France has experienced in the past few years, France has still decided it must keep pushing its influence in Africa. No problem. As France is pushing its interest in Africa, it's in Africa's responsibility to also push its own interests in this continent and even around the world. So why am I saying this? I just saw a report in Africa Intelligence. Is it Africa Intelligence or Africa Intel? One of it though, but it's a French publication focused on France policy in Africa, right? So this publication mentioned that the government of France is looking to come back into Africa, but this time in Madagascar. They want to set up a military base in Madagascar. Hmm. Now, the intended location for this military base is the old port of Diego Suarez. I believe that's the name in Madagascar. Now, if you look at the map of the world, I just took my time to look at the map. If France can get a military base in Madagascar, France has access. France warships have access to the Indian Ocean. And if you look in geopolitics now, quite all right, the game is between the United States is looking for ways to counter China, is also looking for ways to counter um, Russia. But there's a country that is gradually becoming a world power, and the United States may be looking to counter in the near future. And that country is India. And if you look at this Madagascar, I believe India already has a military base in Madagascar. And so, if you look at Madagascar, Madagascar gives these French warships access to the Indian Ocean. And now, France, if you follow geopolitics, you already know that France, quite right, they come to Africa to say we are the boss, we are the boss, we are the boss. But France is really just a vassal state of the United States. So, whatever France does, look at it not just in France interest, but particularly in the interest of the United States. So, right here now, in Madagascar, United States may decide, maybe down the line or something, I don't know, but may decide to use that for posturing against India. Because if you but now India is supposedly US ally, but if you look at what just happened this past week, you find out that uh, after all, one of US government officials one time he said to be I'm paraphrasing, but to be America's enemy is dangerous, but to be America's friend is fatal. He said that. So right now it's supposed to be like India and United States are friends. But if you see what just happened with Bangladesh, you understand that US does not have no permanent friend, no permanent foe. Because the government of Bangladesh, this lady that was just ousted, I've forgotten her name, but this woman that was just ousted, she's pro India. So India needs her there for India's own influence in the Indian subcontinent. But instead, she just told us that it's the United States that kicked her out of power because US wanted a an island and then she refused to give it to the Americans. So they kicked her out to bring in, and then the person who is coming in is pro America. I want to see if that person is going to give that island to the United States. That's what I'm waiting to see. So anyway, but that happened in Bangladesh and no one consulted India. The Americans didn't consult India to know what do you think. They just went ahead and did it. So if you look at that in geopolitics, you know that this base in Madagascar now that France is trying to put up is going to be America down the line can leverage it to posture against India. Well, I want to talk about Africa. So well, it seems that these authorities in Madagascar, the government of Madagascar is trying to get more funding like um, from France so that they can because some of the things I was seeing as though they are trying to get more concessions and funding from France to undertake some development project to the country in return for allowing France to put military base in the port of Suarez, Diego Suarez. And also, I believe that the president of Madagascar has French citizenship. Anyway, I just wanted you to know what's going on in this area. But then I also want to mention that in as much as we look at these military bases setting up, coming to Madagascar, maybe other parts of Africa, external military bases, I also want you to understand that with that military base, there's also a corresponding, because military base we look at it like for war, physical kinetic war, but there's also a corresponding information war that goes on. I said that because recently France mentioned their setting up of French Africa Command, just like US Africa Command. There's going to be a French Africa Command, but the French Africa Command is not going to be so focused on um, military bases. It's going to focus more on information warfare, which in essence is propaganda. So France has realized, after what happened in West Africa, France has realized that they are the people of Africa are sick of France. And that's the truth. The people of Africa are sick of France. In fact, if you see the way, like, when mentioned earlier that in the previous segment, that I was supporting President Faye, that he shouldn't completely cut off France, right? Even if you want to get rid of the French military base, don't just completely sever ties with France. You can still work and do business with France to make money from France. I said that, and that is one conversation that I had on this show. I got serious pushback. Africans are sick of it. They said France go. So clearly, even from just my comment section in that video, you can see that France has lost influence in Africa. Africans are sick of France. France has realized that and are trying to launder their image. Not the way they do money laundering. France is trying to do image laundering. It's trying to launder its image. And so, with this setup of France Africa Command, they want to do propaganda to change the perception of France in the mind of Africans. I want to give an example of how this kind of propaganda works. Sometime last, no, sometime this year, I saw it was a conversation people were having. And so one of the things that they mentioned in that I thought was very interesting that was mentioned in that conversation, it was a podcast I was listening to. One of the things that was mentioned in that conversation is that United States in Africa was paying had a program where the US was paying journalists to write bad stories about China. So for every I didn't like I said, someone mentioned it, so it's not like I read it in a report or something. Someone mentioned it. I'm just saying what the person said. So these projects, for every bad article you write about China in Africa, US was going to pay $1,000. And that is some good money, especially, and they're paying in dollars. So you know that I'm looking at it right now in Nigeria. $1 is about 1,600 naira, which is really, really, really frightening. I'm telling you, it just happened under this Tinubu regime. It did not used to be like this. Or is it, as I speak, is 1,600 naira for $1. So if a Nigerian journalist has access to these funds, that means $1,000. I make 1.6 million naira per bad article written about China. I can I can just say my career is to be writing bad articles about China. My career, I just write, I do smell pieces about China. I'm saying that because I need you to understand how this propaganda works. You will see the article is coming from a Nigerian journalist, like I mentioned in the first segment, how they are trying to destroy Dangote refinery, and they try to pay Nigerian journalists $500 to write bad things about Dangote refinery, so that the Nigerian government can use that as a pretext to destroy Dangote's refinery. Do you get me? So anyway, you will read the article and say, "Oh, this is not written by an American, it's written by a Nigerian. Wow, so that means the person is China is really doing bad things." So you're reading that. I can decide to do 10 bad articles about China in a week. That gives me $10,000 in a week. $10,000 in a week is like 16 million naira a week. Wow, that's a lot of money though. Hey, this was good of Nazareth. That's a lot of money. So if I do 10,000 10 bad articles about China in a week, that gives me $10,000 a week. In a month, that is $40,000. How many Nigerians are earning 40,000? And I don't mean just like I mean even maybe even top even executives. How many of them are doing $40,000 a month? And I just have to sit in my house to be writing bad things about China. This is how propaganda works. You would read it and just say, so now you're just having bad opinion about China, bad opinion about China, bad opinion about China. You don't know who is paying for it. The thing may not even be completely factual. It may just be skewed story just to paint China bad. So now Africans will not like China and they'll be saying, if you don't like China, maybe you're not going to see America in a better light. This is the way propaganda works. I need you to understand. This is the way propaganda works. So I said that because France is telling us that it's setting up its France Africa Command. And one of the things that France Africa Command will do will be engaged in information space, information warfare, aka propaganda. Propaganda. So at this point, be ready to see stories that will paint France in a very good light in the interest of in several African countries. And in these African countries, say maybe like in Burkina Faso, they may now be painting the military in a bad light. After all, they just tried to assassinate um, Ibrahim Traore again, like last week. Just again, they just tried to assassinate him again. We see the way they are. You see, there's some stories that are coming out in Mali about they're not the government, but Mali's military. And remember that the military in Mali is the government in Mali is a military regime. So if they paint the military bad, they're effectively trying to paint the government bad. You need to be very careful. You need to be very careful. Still showing, I want to give an example of how propaganda works. I'm still going to use United States and China. During the pandemic, United States, the Pentagon, and the see, sometimes when they tell you propaganda, you think propaganda is just normal people. Propaganda is a military arm. It's the Pentagon that handles propaganda in the United States. So anyway, the Pentagon engaged in a propaganda effort within Asia, particularly countries who are friendly with China. And the propaganda was an anti-vaccine propaganda. They had several social media handles, many of them many of them in countries like Indonesia, Philippines, and the rest of them. And this social media, and these were probably bot handles or bot accounts, not like real people were handling it. They were bot accounts. What were the accounts publishing? Bad news about China vaccines from China. Bad news about vaccines from China. That was what the Pentagon was engaged in. So that the people will say, oh, anything, this China vaccine, no, we don't want to buy, we don't want to take vaccines from China. Give us American vaccines. In fact, the Pentagon was doing this while the US government was fighting Americans for their anti vaccine stance. YouTube was removing videos of Americans that were questioning the vaccines. American questioning American vaccines. YouTube was removing their videos. American government was fighting Americans that were questioning the vaccines in the United States. But as they were fighting Americans saying, do not question vaccines, they were instigating the questioning of Chinese vaccines in Asia. Propaganda. Propaganda. Africa, you need to be very careful. Stories that are painting, see, particularly painting Russia, China, painting them bad. I'm not saying that they are good. I'm not saying Russians are good. I'm not saying the Chinese are good. But I'm saying sometimes it may be coming from external players who are funding these journalists within the continent. So when you see any story, take your time to research it. France has told us they are setting up France Africa Command that is going to be engaged in information warfare. So be expecting to see stories that will paint France in a good light in Africa. I'm not saying France is not good though. Maybe France is the best country in the world. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that it is not true. France is likely the best country in the world. But if they are engaged in this thing, the battle is for your mind. You need to be very careful. You need to be very careful. Take your time to research stories. Take your time to research articles. Take your time to read between the lines Because sometimes you think an article is saying something, but it's not really saying that thing. It's just playing with words in a way that you cannot catch it and say, you, this is what you explicitly said. There is an ongoing battle in Africa. I said that in one of the previous episodes of the Amanda Show. There's an ongoing battle in Africa. The battle is for the minds of Africans. Because those people who you have been kicking out and you say it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. I'm not saying they are bad, I'm not saying they are good. But you were kicking them out for a reason. They are coming back. They will not go out and stay out. They will find a way to come back. Because in their mind, it's in their interest to be on this continent. Their interest is tied to this continent. So you need to be very careful of the stories you parrot. All right, so what do you think? France is coming back to Africa with another military base, this time in Madagascar. And as they are setting up a military base in Madagascar, they are ensuring to have fast propaganda running 247 across the continent. Let me know what you think about this development in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share this video with your friends and your family members so we can reach more people across the continent.